Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. This week we are joined by Galina Kho of Cyberbay. Galina, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, we are exactly 12 hours apart in time, and you are on the other side of the world, hailing from Hong Kong. Tell us a little bit about you and Cyberbay and how just give us a little overview of Cyberbay, and then we'll jump into some of the ideas that were presented as far as what we should be talking about today.
Sounds good. Yeah, so I am the Chief Strategy Officer of Cyberbay. I'm currently based in Hong Kong, originally from New York. So Cyberbay itself, like we're kind of like an overview of everything. So we have like bounty systems, and we have, we're also working on like a phishing simulation that we have like voice phishing and email phishing. We also have like attack surface monitoring. So kind of like we call ourselves Cyber Bay because we want to be kind of like the one-stop shop of everything cyber related. Because a lot of things in general, like cybersecurity is very fragmented. And if you look at
Yeah,
different tools, lots of tools that have like separate, like oh, this, takes care of the reactive part. There's like the ransomware, all these things. So for us, like we kind of want to be like a one-stop shop to everything. So yeah, so we a lot of those tools out there focus on reactive security, but part of what we notice is that a lot of times when people contact us, or they only raise alarms when they get hacked. They come to us and say, "Hey, we got hacked. What should we do?" And a lot of times, like cybersecurity, it's kind of like it's a kind of like a safe. It's not like it's boring. It's really necessary. But at the same time, people never really think about it until they're in trouble. They always think that it won't happen to them. And
sure.
what we want to prevent is that like we want to kind of like promote like proactive security and also just kind of like raise the idea of continuous monitoring. So a
Right.
lot of our systems kind of work on, it's like not like a point in time kind of like assessment. So a lot of our tools is based on like just real time constant monitoring to show that like we're always on and we're always just, seeing like what's out there, and we're always like watching to see like like we have tons of data points, and we use a lot of AI, and we kind of also comb through like the dark web and stuff to see what's the likelihood of your organization getting attacked in the next 12 months. We also we're going to build like a huge database to become like a cyber risk meter where we can see like, company can see, like, hey, based on what's out there, an attacker see like, what industries are being attacked. And based on their own security posture, we'll analyze, all these data points to see, what's the predictive likelihood of attack happening to you in the next 12 months. So that's
Sure.
kind of like cyber in a nutshell. So yeah.
So it's interesting, we think about all of the tools that we use, and one of the things that for years it's making sense of the noise, right? Firewall logs and false positives, and just combing through all of that mass amount of data, and you're constantly providing guidance to the businesses that need to protect themselves, and it's like MFA, and make sure you have firewalls, and make sure you've got the XDRs and the fill in the blanks and all of these things. And it's like, and it keeps adding up. And you start to see that there's this fatigue happening of like, I'm still implementing the next thing. So am I resilient? Am I going to, stand up to the threat actor that's, attacking my infrastructure? And I think the question has kind of come to this conclusion. It's not how many things have we implemented, it's how we handle the pressure when something happens that matters the most. And I think that's the shift that I've had just recently, where it's like the maturity inflection point is not how well I've implemented, say, CIS top 18 best practices or ISO 27001. It's whether or not I have the right people, the right things in place to respond when we know the inevitable happens. And I was thinking about what you said. It's kind of like having your own agency working on your behalf, right? Let me know what the probability is that my business is going to get hacked in the next 12 months, which actually, this is probably the first time I've actually ever heard that said. We always say, you know, the threat actors are out there and they're looking for businesses that match your profile, but not the threat actors are out there looking at your business. That's the first time I've heard that one.
Yeah, also like also jump into that. So we also leverage like crowdsourced security. Something you mentioned that like right now like a lot of like the firms and stuff like they like how do we magnify it? Because a lot of these like the end internal teams and stuff, like we really have to like leverage, the external. Like we have a whole platform with thousands of ethical hackers, at our call because we run a platform, and through that platform, like as you know, there's actually a huge shortage of talent in cybersecurity right now, and a lot of the
Yeah.
companies they do have an in-house team, and they do say, oh, we run security testing once a year, and we think it's fine because most security testing is still point in time. They run a pen test to get a report, and they fix a few
Right.
things, and then like months later it looks really different. But then cyber attacks like don't really happen like that. Like they're always like the bad actors are always scanning and they're always looking for new opportunities. Like, as you said, they're always like constantly sharing intelligence, So I think that bug bounties, are bread and butter. And a huge part of it is that like we believe that crowdsourcing is so powerful because, like a lot of these attackers, they're global. So we leverage global like ethical hackers from all over the world, and they all have different expertise and different perspectives, and they all like have different masteries and traits. And it's also all continuous. So we use these hackers and they continuously, monitor your systems. So realistically, like none of these like service providers can hire like all the specialists they can for like every
Right.
cloud platform, every app like framework and all that. But then to have like, thousands of ethical hackers, like at your beck and call, it's really, really strong. And it's like because attack surface just keeps growing faster and faster. So I think like the future isn't really about like bigger internal teams. It's about like building like stronger security ecosystems. And I feel like for us, like crowdsourced security, it's a way to build the strongest security ecosystem. So yeah.
Yeah, the time from found to the time to exploit is obviously exponentially growing. I mean, AI has made it very clear with Mythos kind of setting the stage, and then Microsoft released their own model that was just as powerful, if not more so, using existing standard LLMs. And so it's like, okay, this is just a matter of time before all of those that would choose to do malicious things have, the Mac Mini in the basement, and that's all they need to start figuring out what is exploitable and set their own, their own priorities and agenda. And I think we were actually talking about this last week that the CVEs that come out are going to outpace any organization's ability to remediate them. And so now, kind of to your point, it's what are the likelihood and probabilities that these are being exploited? So if I have this, list of 50 or 100 or however many it is, what are the ones that are, whether they're low or not, whether they're a low impact or not, what are the probabilities that these are going to happen so that we can at least prioritize based on what can be reasonable today. And I think over time, the reality is how do we just reduce, make it more difficult? Right now it's like pretty much any attack, if it gets through, there was some sort of ROI for them to do it, right? And I think tomorrow, if we can slow that down or make it less financially viable to do it the way they're approaching it today, maybe we'll see some shifting in the other direction where the bad guys don't always win.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. So yeah.
So just one question, you kind of mentioned this already, thinking about the crowdsourcing and ethical hackers and having those resources all around the world. How do you go about vetting, the difference between what is ethical, gray, and downright malicious when you're evaluating potential candidates to be part of this crowdsourced team?
So we go through rigorous vetting systems. So we actually use an outsourced like third party vendor for security for like they're called Enfido. So yeah, so they kind of vet through and make sure that they do a background check, make sure they're legit. And then we also have a VPN. So we also like it's our Lighthouse VPN where we monitor, like every action that they do. And
Okay.
whatever they yeah, so that's how we kind of make sure that, like sometimes we do get asked, what happens if one of these supposedly ethical hackers go bad, So we're always every action that they take, like we're constantly monitoring. And also like honestly, like most of if they were like a bad, like hacker, they probably would have just done it anyways. They wouldn't just go through the system. They could just like hack it directly, right? So they wouldn't really have to
Right.
like join a platform, just to hack, But for us, it's like honestly, like they're just as skilled, as any malicious, like hacker. It's just that like they've chosen to use their skills like for good. So I think in general, like a lot of these different like also it's kind of like a two-way street. It's kind of like they want to be trusted as well, So like I think important part of it is that like a lot of people see like these hackers as like, oh, they're not like employees, but they're also
Sure,
just, like yeah, so they're like it comes from like a partnership with like expectations. They need to know like what's in scope, like how their findings been evaluated, how rewards are determined, and whether their work is actually making an impact, So I think sometimes
sure.
like companies they kind of see like web bounty as like, oh, we're just buying reports and or like looking for, like someone to just like do a test and give us a productive report. But that's not
Sure.
really what bug bounty is about. It's about kind of like just building like a deeper relationship, with the global security community and leveraging,
Yeah.
their tasks and stuff like that. So yeah, so I think
Yeah,
like
no.
for us, like oh yeah, sorry, you can go ahead.
No, no, you're I was gonna agree with you, but you were still going, so I want to let you finish. I'm sorry.
I don't know, just like, so on our platform, I've just found that like a lot of our researchers are much more engaged, like when they receive like feedback from us and when they see that like their findings are taken seriously and that we're actually gonna like fix something, so they want to know that, their findings are being used, So I think like a lot of times like organizations gain a lot of confidence that like when this process like really structured and really transparent and produce like high quality results. So like I guess hackers also feel that they already if they can collaborate with the companies, then they also want to like share techniques and tools and intelligence. So it's kind of like a two-way street. So yeah.
Yeah, so to some extent, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this as well. You think about what goes from quote being ethical hacker to questionable hacker because of the feeling of being ignored, right? So they find something, they report on it, they get ignored, or they get told that that's not true, and in many cases they even follow the rules of like, okay, I gave them 90 days and not even getting acknowledged for this. I'm letting the world know that this is out there because then at least those who haven't discovered this yet, whether they do or don't, it's just a matter of time. Because very rarely is one person's bug find the only one that will ever find that bug, right? Like it's not like walking down the beach with a metal detector and just hoping that no one ever comes behind you in the same spot and finds something that you missed when you went there first, right? Like, I mean, it's still going to happen. And I think you said this a couple times. I think is really important. You kept referencing community, feeling validated, feeling you're part of a team. And I think that in our current, definitely post COVID, the global culture around just the human feelings of being belonging to something is extremely important, and especially now when so many people don't work in an office with 5 or 10 or 50 other people. There's no water cooler talk unless it's happening, via a Teams or a Zoom call. So like to constantly have community for what I would imagine with crowdsourced ethical hackers is largely, people working from their basements, working from mom and dad's basement, or but not having to be a part of an actual corporate culture, right? So this is their community. I think that's really important, really powerful. I love it. Shifting gears a little bit, I think I was at a conference earlier this week, and I think AI fatigue is happening. Not the use of AI, not the what AI can do or how powerful AI is, but just the constant using AI to describe or present on just about everything. Like, because of AI, we can do this. Okay, great. How many things were we doing before that used AI, but we didn't use the word AI in the sentence to describe what we were doing? And I think we've kind of gotten back to that, right? Where if you told me that your firewall has AI in it, that's not a question I'm asking. I just want to know if the firewall does the job it's supposed to do, and that's it. Like I don't care how you built out the technology to make this a reality. I just want to know that it works. So as you guys are shifting gears, and I know one of the things that you talked about in here is the predictive, cyber risk. And you mentioned kind of with like the research around like who's going to be attacked next and what that might look like. I don't know if you can describe in detail, but like, how do you see the role of AI in that cyber risk prediction? How does that work in today's, current ecosystem?
Oh, I think like how to say that? Like so I think like AI, like as you mentioned, like AI itself isn't like the advantage. It's like how do you use it, because everyone has access to AI right now, right? So I think like
Mhm.
attackers have it, like defenders have like everyone, So it's kind of like what do you combine AI with, So I think for us, like we kind of see like AI is kind of like a force multiplier. So I feel like there's already tons of information out there, tons of patterns, and anybody can use it. So I think for us it's like our hackers like bring in like creativity, they bring in like real world attacker thinking. So I feel like when we have all these different things, AI brings like speed and scale. So we're actually like trying
Mhm.
to see if we can get our ethical hackers to create their own AI agents to help them, find more bugs. So I don't think it's
Sure.
like AI versus like humans or anything. It's more like how do you, use like enable like AI agents, to help,
Sure.
ethical hackers magnify all that. So because I'm like all these cyber criminals are already using AI to like, send more convincing phishing emails, find more
Right.
vulnerabilities and all that. So I feel like if they're just using it, as a chatbot, then they're probably like not like using it effectively. But if we're
Sure.
using AI to help like security teams detect threats, investigate alerts and all that, then it creates like more meaning. So it's kind of like not a lot of us just focus on outcomes, but then kind of like thinking is of it's like is AI really helping them spot attack faster? So it's kind of
Right.
like it's not really going to replacement for AI can't really replace the creative professionals. So I think it's like the best results usually come from when AI kind of like helps us handle like the more repetitive and time consuming stuff. So I feel like it isn't really about like whether or not like they're making security teams like faster or more informed,
Sure.
but it's like kind of like out to how do you combine it with something to make it like go even faster, but it should be already
Yeah.
there. So yeah.
You think about like being a threat analyst, which is not something that I ever wanted to do, but I could say that today with AI, it's a little bit different, right? My ability as a human to detect patterns or determine something that doesn't logically make sense in the code is going to take a whole heck of a lot longer than what AI does when it looks at the code and says, I found in these four different locations, and it specifically can call out the line of code that it's reading as being incorrect or has additional variables included that shouldn't be there is actually quite powerful. And at the same time, it's very humbling. Like if you have been a threat analyst for however long, and suddenly you have these tools at your fingertips, you're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea I couldn't see these predictions like I'm supposed to. But I mean, I think is that not where we're at? Like it's that the human element creates the value that AI brings to be something of quality as opposed to just quantitatively scaling those functionality. I mean, scale without oversight is not really all that valuable.
Yeah, for sure. I think like a lot of it's just a lot of organizations, like it's very tempting for them to just buy another security tool. They just kind of,
Sure.
oh, there's a new problem, let's just, get more. But a lot of it's actually
Yeah.
like it's like there's human error involved too, because how strong are your actual teams? Like maybe someone in your own employee clicks a phishing link, they reuse like some passwords. It's kind of like a lot of it's just focused on how do you reduce that risk. Kind of like technology can reduce risk, but can't like, eliminate like human behavior. So I think a
Right.
lot of times like we're actually building up, our product semi-call, kind of just see how we can help strengthen, like the teams, the human factor of all of this. So yeah.
Yeah. Going back to the staff part, the you were talking earlier about the shortage of staffing in this space, and I think you look at the mid-market enterprise space and these massive layoffs because they're using AI to enhance the human workload, for good, bad, or otherwise. We saw this during the Industrial Revolution, and particularly when we started to see the assembly line and automotive scale of the factory workers, where at a certain point you need another manager or superintendent to help manage communications throughout the organization to get it all the way up to the leadership team. And you look in the SMB space today, well, we've never had those layers of resources because one, it would sort of defeat them being an SMB because they're working with a whole lot smaller numbers. But now with AI, you've eliminated really in many cases, and we're seeing that happen. It's not AI has just suddenly changed the need for these individuals being part of the team. They just are no longer needed in specific organizations where all they functioned to do was be that communication layer. So I think that's going to help transfer to the SMB space a lot of potential candidates to help from a staffing standpoint. But the other piece that I think is just as important is what are we enabling them to do with AI, right? So like I was thinking about like from a tool standpoint, when in the MSP space, if they're hiring somebody to be their threat analyst, but then they don't give them the resources from a, like I think I don't know if you've seen this, but like basically hiring somebody and part of their hiring package or their salary and benefits includes X number of tokens against whatever AI models are allowed in their organization. So, you get maybe a subscription to, Claude or fill in the blank. And that's part of what is your compensation package, because essentially it's you and we're also giving you an assistant, but you're responsible for, paying your assistant, not the company is now paying your assistant too, right? I don't know if you've seen that at all, but like I think that's some of the things that I would ask if I was being hired to be in those roles. It's like, well, what kind of AI tool are you going to give me access to ensure that I can be as competitive and efficient and, protect this organization with what you're asking me to do?
Yeah, for sure. I think like part of it, like as you said, like I think it's like he's helping your existing teams like work smarter, like not just like harder,
Yeah,
because it's already like a short, in supply. So I feel like a lot of them, the MSPs kind of automate repetitive tasks. They use like AI to kind of like help in monitoring, triaging things, kind of standardizing processes, but a lot of it is like it's not just like a talent shortage problem, it's actually more of like a scalability problem because our
sure.
tech service is growing so fast, so instead of asking like how do we like grow our teams, it's more about like how do we make our existing security teams like more effective. And I think like that's where like automation, AI and process security can like help a lot, because AI can help like process information like at scale, and automation can eliminate those repetitive tasks. And then all these ethical hackers and the AI agents that ethical hackers have built can continue to test these environments like from all these different perspectives. That can
Sure.
allows like internal security teams to kind of focus on things that kind of require like the huge human judgment part that AI like can't do, kind of like advising customers and making strategic decisions and all that stuff. So yeah, so I feel like the
Making them
ones that
feel
like kind of,
better.
yeah, like the ones that like, will succeed actually aren't the ones with like the biggest teams. It's kind of the ones that kind of like built like this like the smartest ecosystem, like using what they already have. So yeah.
Right. If we go back in time, 10 plus years, maybe not quite that long, we started to see where the tool space or the technology space that we use to manage the patching, manage the infrastructure changes, that largely those tools were becoming more and more common and more reliable. You could pick your flavor. I mean, now instead of even buying some of those tools, you get them if you're a 360 Microsoft 365 shop. A lot of those tools are now baked into as almost like accessories to the things that you're investing in. But now we get into this sort of new cycle, this next cycle for from a technology standpoint, where the tools and the evolution obviously are happening at a much more rapid scale. That's not tools are we're gonna have tools for tools, and then we'll have tools just to monitor the tools to monitor other tools. But what comes to mind is we have a huge shift happening where our reliance on tools, as important as it is, we're seeing the shift back in the other direction where the human element is becoming the critical component to scalability and success. And we kind of keep hitting on it without actually saying it. Like there's a culture shift that has to happen, particularly in the MSP ITSP space, or we are going to have a very complicated, chaotic environment in the not too distant future.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. So yeah, definitely.
So we've
I
got a
mean,
little bit of time. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
oh no, like we're good. We're good.
No, if you got a thought, you got to share it.
Uh, no, I think just a lot of it, just like a lot of there's like a shift from being like a resource like based mindset to kind of like shifting towards like an intelligence based one. So I feel like like instead of just like hiring more people and doing all that, like it's just like a lot of just building like intelligence networks. So I think that's what I see with just like AI. Is not to kind of, I think instead of using AI to just like replace tasks, it's like now it's for next shift for AI. It's like kind of like how do we use these, like tools and stuff to build like networks to leverage any expertise which exists before, and how do you just want to like magnify all that? So yeah.
Yeah, we heard both Microsoft talking about this recently and earlier this week at the PAX 8 event. They were talking about the MIA or the Managed Intelligence Advisor. Uh, and it's interesting because that is what we're being asked to do. We're no longer constrained by not being able to build a software package or a widget or a dashboard because of not having enough people or skill set from a project and time and money standpoint. We now have tools like Claude and others that can build those applications in minutes, if not seconds in some cases. So going back to the human element piece, what determines whether or not it was built correctly or that it doesn't have some underlying vulnerability that sinks it for everybody? Is that how we scale this? Is that really the answer? Like the scalability of providing the technology tools and services to the larger ecosystem of the SMB and even up into mid-market and enterprise, it ultimately comes down to that human element, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it's just like the human is the most important part, because like AI, there's still a lot of things that like AI tries to replace, but there's a lot of things that like just for intelligence it just can't do it. So I feel like
Yeah.
it's like how much intelligence can we access and opportunity to deliver to our customers? It's like it's not like about like how many people can we hire. So I feel like the organizations that kind of succeed like in the future are the ones that can combine intelligence from all these different aspects, like from AI to hackers, security analysts, and turn that intelligence into like actionable outcomes and insights, for their clients. So yeah.
So that kind of goes to the last question I had really is, what's the the MSP world right now is at a pivot point where AI adoption has already happened. In fact, we did some research at GTA that shows that we're in the 96 to 98% of basically our space having adopted technology. So like that's not a differentiator anymore. But the strategy part and the governance part of how we use AI and technology in general is. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are from a strategy standpoint. You know, right now is critical for all the ITSPs because they are the ones that can provide the governance, especially in the SMB space, and they can be narrowly focused with that expertise to help the businesses navigate with good governance as opposed to, well, I'm just going to go hire a third party developer to build my app in AI and then hope bad things don't happen.
Well, I think that I had mentioned like I think it's more like that shift from like a resource and tool mindset to like the intelligence based mindset. So I think for us it's like trying to think about like how do you use like for organizations, a lot of them try to just scale by hiring more people, more tools, more platforms. And then that works up to a certain point, but eventually like growth gets constrained by like recruitment, training, retention, all these things. But I think when I think of like a global like aspect, it kind of operates like differently. And it's about like building like really, really smart ecosystems, and leveraging, like crowdsourced security and leveraging, like global networks. So I feel like as I read, one of our core like beliefs is that like there's not like a single company that can like possess like all the different expertise is needed, to defend a modern digital environment. So the
Sure,
ones that eventually will succeed are the ones that like use like everything, and just they're just and they're very open-minded and also just like just embrace like using different tools and different like just
sure,
knowing, like their restraints as well. So a lot of them to say, I think they're kind of so like thinking back and saying like I mentioned like they're just very, very reactive and they say they really only think of cybersecurity when something happens and they still believe in like point in time. So it's a lot of just like embracing continuous monitoring and continuous testing. That's one thing. And also just knowing that like it's not just the best time to, kind of like embrace cybersecurity isn't when something happens or has happened already. It's before it happens, So it's also just knowing kind of like imagine like a house and there's like open windows and there's like maybe you have like opens doors or like locks that don't work. Like a lot of times like they actually don't even realize how many windows they have in the house in the first place. So they think that like maybe they think they have like 4 or 5 windows and they think it's fine, but and they say, oh, we have done our testing, like we tried to open the windows once a year and they seem fine, but they really don't, they're not aware that there may be like 10 more that are hidden and maybe like someone's like a little bit rusty, and all these different things. So the continuous monitoring kind of helps that because you're always like looking to evaluate everything all the time and you're always like stress testing and it's always like there's always something on and it's also just like continues attacking from all different perspectives and all over the world. So it's like not just from like a point in time with like we ran a test and we passed because that's like a simulation and it's not really real. So I think a lot of it's just like about like how do you like leverage like this global ethical hacker system to kind of just
Yeah.
like magnify that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. You think about it, we're shifting the mindset from a me model, like my company and my what I do for my clients, to more of a we model, so that, yeah, we may be competing against each other in our own geographies or for particular client opportunities, but the reality is the things that we're trying to protect for, if we want to really be in the winning camp, we can't do it in a silo. We've got to bring a much larger, and to your point, a crowdsourced community together to actually make a difference.
Yeah, definitely.
So, last question. I don't know if you were prepped on this. I think you were based on the notes. Is there a book that you're reading right now that you would like to share with the audience? Whether it's fiction, it can be historical, it can be a textbook that you found valuable that our audience might be interested in.
I recently read a few books. Like one was actually it's called How to Know a Person by David Brooks, and it's actually like more. It's not about cybersecurity, but it's more about like how do you really see people? Like how do you
Yeah,
understand people and how you bring out the best in people? Because a lot of people just go through life and they just just like they're always kind of like just. But it's about how do you make someone feel deeply seen or heard and valued. So it's like kind of like the difference between like being interesting versus being interested in what people are saying. And so I think kind of like if it to tie into like what we're talking about today, and a lot of it's just like because with with the widespread usage of AI, that human element has been decreasing. But I think like a lot of it's just like how do you go back and like like to truly get to know people and connect on that human to human level. And in cybersecurity, there's still that aspect of trust, because a lot of times, like when we say, oh, it's a platform, we have ethical hackers, lots of them, and they can help you find bugs, but they still want a person to kind of manage all of that
right.
because they want to hear from a human person. Because, when it comes to like private data and the sensitive data and all this like security stuff, like they still would rather trust, a human being versus trust like an AI system that will like comb through vulnerabilities and stuff like that. So I think end of the day, like there's still like with all this, like, like the master use of AI, there's still a great need for that human element and the
Yeah,
importance of, connecting at a human level.
I like it. For those of you listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks and have a great week.
Thank you.